The avoidant moved on quickly after your relationship ended or after you walked away. They found someone new within weeks or months, appeared to transition seamlessly into new relationship, demonstrated through their rapid replacement that you were not as significant or irreplaceable as you believed during your time together. This quick replacement hurt you deeply because it seemed to confirm your fears that you meant little to them, that they could easily find someone else who provided what you provided, that your extensive accommodation and your patient tolerance of their patterns was not special or valuable, but was simply baseline they could find anywhere. You watched them appear happy with new person through social media or through mutual friends, watched them seemingly build with replacement what they could not build with you. Concluded that perhaps you were the problem, or perhaps they simply did not care about you enough to make effort they are apparently making with someone new. Yet months pass, and you begin detecting signals that the replacement situation has not unfolded as the avoidant anticipated, that the new relationship is struggling or has already failed, that the avoidant is demonstrating obsessive focus on you that indicates the replacement backfired rather than successfully filling the void your departure created. They are asking mutual friends about you with frequency that suggests ongoing preoccupation. They are monitoring your social media obsessively, despite being in new relationship. They are making indirect contact attempts that indicate they are thinking about you constantly. They are comparing new person to you in ways that mutual friends report back, suggesting new person falls short in every comparison. The replacement backfired because the new person could not or would not replicate the specific accommodation you provided that made relationship with avoidant remotely functional despite their defended patterns. New person has boundaries you did not maintain, has standards you did not enforce, has self-respect that prevents tolerating treatment you tolerated for extended periods. The contrast between your extensive accommodation and new person's healthy boundaries has exposed to the avoidant exactly how much you accommodated, exactly how rare your tolerance was, exactly how unlikely they are to find someone else willing to sacrifice themselves as extensively as you sacrificed yourself to maintain relationship with their defended limitations. This recognition generates obsession with you as the one who got away, as the ideal partner who accepted them as they were, as irreplaceable person whose specific combination of understanding and accommodation and other valuable qualities they will not encounter again. Yet their obsession with you does not indicate they have developed capacity to deserve you back, does not suggest they have done therapeutic work to address patterns that necessitated your extensive accommodation, does not mean reconnection would produce different outcome than original relationship that required your constant sacrifice of legitimate needs to maintain their defended comfort. The replacement couldn't replicate what you tolerated, exposing how much you accommodated. The avoidant entered new relationship with expectations shaped by their experience with you. Expectations that new person would provide similar understanding of their patterns, would accommodate their need for space and distance without complaint, would tolerate their emotional unavailability with patience you demonstrated, would adjust their needs downward to match the avoidant's limited capacity without the avoidant having to expand that capacity. These expectations felt reasonable to the avoidant because your extensive accommodation had normalized inadequate treatment as acceptable relationship baseline, had taught them that their defended limitations are not actually problematic if partner is understanding enough, had confirmed their belief that adequate partners will accept their patterns without requiring substantial change or without implementing consequences that make patterns unsustainable. Yet the replacement person operates from different framework than you operated from. Framework that includes healthy boundaries, reasonable standards, self-respect that prevents accepting treatment that falls below acceptable minimum. When the avoidant withdraws, as they withdrew from you, the replacement does not anxiously pursue or tolerate the distance with patience. The replacement establishes that extended withdrawal without communication is unacceptable and implements consequences like reducing their own availability or explicitly stating the pattern must change. When the avoidant demonstrates emotional unavailability, as they demonstrated with you, the replacement does not suppress their own needs or modify their expectations. The replacement communicates that emotional intimacy is a relationship requirement and indicates they will leave if emotional availability is not provided. When the avoidant cancels plans or demonstrates inconsistency, as they did with you, the replacement does not remain perpetually available, waiting for the avoidant's convenience. The replacement makes other plans and is genuinely busy when the avoidant decides they want attention. This difference between your accommodation and the replacement's boundaries creates immediate friction in new relationship that exposes how much you tolerate it, without the avoidant recognizing your tolerance was extraordinary rather than standard. The replacement characterizes as unacceptable the same behaviors you accepted for months or years. The replacement establishes as deal breakers the same patterns you accommodated as unfortunate limitations requiring your understanding. The replacement implements consequences for behaviors you responded to with increased effort to be more accommodating. The avoidant suddenly faces that what they considered normal relationship behavior, their withdrawal, their emotional distance, their inconsistency, is actually problematic behavior that partners with self-respect will not tolerate indefinitely. The contrast forces recognition that your accommodation was not standard baseline, but was exceptional tolerance that required you to suppress legitimate needs, to minimize reasonable expectations, to sacrifice yourself extensively, to maintain relationship that the avoidance patterns made inherently dysfunctional. You gave them space when they withdrew, rather than establishing that extended withdrawal required explanation and repair. You tolerated their emotional unavailability by adjusting your intimacy needs downward, rather than requiring they develop emotional capacity. You remained available despite their inconsistency by organizing your life around their sporadic attention, rather than requiring they respect your time through reliable follow-through. You suppressed your feelings when their behavior hurt you to avoid being characterized as too sensitive or too demanding. You explained away their inadequacy to friends and family who questioned why you tolerated such treatment. You maintained hope and patience through years of minimal progress toward relationship you actually needed. The replacement's refusal to provide similar accommodation reveals to the avoidant that finding someone who will tolerate their patterns as extensively as you tolerated them is statistically improbable. Most people with healthy self-respect establish boundaries around withdrawal, around emotional unavailability, around inconsistency that make those patterns costly rather than cost-free. Most people will leave relationship that requires constant sacrifice of legitimate needs, rather than remaining indefinitely hoping the avoidant will eventually develop capacity to meet those needs. Most people will not suppress their authentic selves to fit within the narrow confines of what the avoidant's defended limitations allow. The avoidant assumed what you provided was standard that they could easily find elsewhere. The replacement relationship demonstrates your accommodation was rare exception rather than replicable baseline. The exposure of your extraordinary accommodation through the replacement's normal boundaries generates obsession with you, because the avoidant recognizes they lost someone who made their defended existence comfortable in ways no one else will make comfortable. With you, they could maintain all their patterns without facing consequences that would force examination of whether those patterns serve them. With you, they received consistent acceptance despite inconsistent presence. With you, they experienced relationship that required minimal vulnerability or emotional availability, yet provided them benefits of partnership. With you, they had perfect setup where they maintained defended comfort while accessing connection. They could have both defended autonomy and relationship security without having to choose or compromise or grow. The replacement cannot provide this perfect defended setup because the replacement has boundaries that create discomfort around the avoidance patterns rather than accommodation that makes patterns comfortable. The avoidant must choose between maintaining patterns and maintaining new relationship in ways they never had to choose with you, because you absorbed the costs of their patterns rather than requiring they face those costs. The discomfort with replacement generates idealization of you. You become the partner who understood them, who accepted them as they were, who did not pressure them or make them feel inadequate about their defended limitations. The idealization erases memory of your pain, your unmet needs, your gradual deterioration under weight of constant accommodation. The avoidant remembers only that you made their life comfortable in ways the replacement refuses to make their life comfortable. The backfired replacement also forces recognition of specific qualities beyond accommodation that made you uniquely valuable: your intelligence, your emotional stability, your life competence, your understanding of their psychology, your specific personality traits that meshed with theirs, your patience that allowed them time to process and withdraw without pressure. The replacement may possess some of these qualities, but lacks the complete package you represented. Perhaps replacement has boundaries, but lacks your emotional intelligence. Perhaps replacement requires reciprocity, but lacks your understanding of avoidant patterns. Perhaps replacement is attractive, but lacks your ability to make the avoidant feel truly known, despite their defended presentation. The incomplete replication reminds the avoidant constantly of what you provided that the replacement cannot provide. Understanding that the replacement backfired by exposing your extraordinary accommodation allows you to recognize the avoidant's obsession with you reflects their recognition that they lost someone who tolerated intolerable treatment, who made their defended dysfunction comfortable, who sacrificed themselves to maintain relationship, their patterns made unsustainable. Yet this recognition should not generate satisfaction or hope. The avoidant is not obsessed with you because they suddenly appreciate your value as person. They are obsessed because they miss the comfortable defended existence your accommodation provided. They want back the relationship where they faced no consequences for their patterns, where they received consistent acceptance despite inconsistent presence, where they maintained all defended comfort while accessing relationship benefits. Their obsession is fundamentally selfish. They miss what you did for them, what you tolerated from them, what you sacrificed to accommodate them, not who you actually are as whole person deserving of reciprocal, healthy partnership. The replacement's boundaries revealed how much you gave up to be with them. Yet their obsession with you does not indicate they would give up anything to deserve you, or that they have developed capacity to meet you even halfway toward a healthy relationship that does not require your constant self-sacrifice. Every comparison to you reminds them they lost someone irreplaceable while settling for less. The avoidant cannot avoid comparing the replacement to you because comparison happens automatically whenever replacement demonstrates differences from what you provided, or whenever situations arise that remind avoidant of how you handled similar situations. The replacement communicates differently than you communicated, perhaps more directly but less understanding, perhaps with clearer boundaries but less patience, perhaps with different style that feels less compatible with avoidant's defended needs. The replacement responds to avoidance withdrawal differently, establishing consequences rather than tolerating distance, expressing hurt or anger rather than suppressing reactions, requiring repair rather than welcoming return without discussion of pattern. The replacement has different interests, different personality traits, different approach to conflict, different emotional regulation style, different life circumstances that make relationship logistics less convenient than logistics were with you. Each difference generates comparison, where the avoidant measures replacement against you and consistently finds replacement lacking in ways that keep you present as the ideal they lost. The replacement is less understanding of their patterns. You intuitively grasped their psychology, while replacement requires extensive explanation and remains skeptical about whether defended limitations are legitimate struggles or are chosen behaviors. The replacement is less patient with their process. You gave them space and time, while replacement expects faster progress and clearer commitment. The replacement is less accommodating of their needs. You adjusted yourself extensively, while replacement expects them to adjust and compromise. The replacement provides less emotional stability. You regulated your own emotions effectively, while replacement's emotional expression feels overwhelming to their defended system. The comparisons particularly intensify around specific triggers that highlight what you provided that replacement cannot provide. When avoidant withdraws and faces replacement's boundary rather than your accommodation, they think about how you made withdrawal comfortable rather than costly. When avoidant wants deep conversation about their internal experience and replacement cannot engage at level you engaged, they remember how you understood them in ways that made them feel known. When avoidant faces challenge and replacement support feels inadequate compared to support you provided, They miss your specific way of being present without being intrusive. When avoidant wants certain activity or experience and replacement is not interested or available, they recall how your interests aligned with theirs in ways that made shared life easy. The constant unfavorable comparisons create cognitive dissonance, where the avoidant recognizes they lost someone superior in multiple dimensions, while they are currently with someone inferior in those same dimensions. This recognition contradicts their defended narrative that justified letting you go or that minimized your significance. They told themselves they could find someone better suited to them, someone less demanding, someone more compatible with their defended needs, someone who would make relationship easier rather than harder. Yet actual experience with replacement demonstrates they traded superior partner who accommodated their defended dysfunction for inferior partner who has boundaries that create friction and discomfort. They downgraded rather than upgraded, lost rather than gained, settled rather than improved. The comparisons also extend beyond the romantic partners themselves to the quality of life the avoidant experiences in each relationship context. Life with you functioned smoothly because you managed so much, you planned activities, you maintained social connections, you handled logistics, you created stability that allowed them to remain in their defended comfortable zone without life falling apart around them. Life with replacement feels more chaotic or less satisfying because replacement does not provide similar life management, expects shared responsibility the avoidant resists, or simply lacks your competence in domains that made daily life easier. The avoidant misses not just you as person, but the entire life structure that your accommodation and your capacities created. The replacement's inadequacies by comparison get amplified in avoidance perception because they are being measured against idealized memory of you that erases your pain and your unmet needs while emphasizing your accommodation and your valuable qualities. The avoidant does not compare replacement to the reality of relationship with you that required your constant sacrifice. They compare replacement to fantasy version of relationship with you that focuses on what you provided while forgetting what you needed that they could not provide. This idealization makes replacement appear even more inadequate because replacement is being measured against impossible standard of you at your most accommodating without the context of what that accommodation cost you. The obsession generated by constant unfavorable comparison manifests through avoidance inability to fully invest in replacement relationship because you occupy so much psychological space. They cannot give replacement fair chance because they are constantly measuring replacement against you. They cannot appreciate replacement's actual positive qualities because they are focused on ways replacement fails to match your specific qualities. They cannot build something new with replacement because they are stuck processing what they lost with you. The comparison trap keeps them oriented backward toward you, rather than forward toward building with person who is actually present in their life. The comparisons also generate specific painful recognition. They lost someone irreplaceable, and they know it. You are not generic partner who can be easily substituted with someone similar. You are a specific, unique person whose combination of qualities and willingness to accommodate and compatibility with their psychology is unlikely to be found again. The statistical improbability of finding another person who possesses your level of understanding and your patience and your accommodation and your other valuable qualities and who is willing to tolerate their patterns creates genuine grief about permanent loss. The replacement's presence does not fill the void you left. The replacement's inadequacies by comparison deepen that void by constantly reminding the avoidant of what they lost. Yet the obsession generated by unfavorable comparisons does not indicate the avoidant has learned from losing you or has developed capacity to build healthy relationship if given another chance. The comparisons focus on what you provided that made their defended existence comfortable rather than focusing on what they failed to provide that made relationship unsustainable. They miss your accommodation without recognizing that accommodation required your constant self-sacrifice. They idealize your understanding without acknowledging that understanding could not compensate for their emotional unavailability. They long for your patience without facing that patience was eventually exhausted by their continued inadequacy. The obsession keeps them focused on external loss of you rather than internal examination of patterns that cost them relationship with you. Understanding that constant, unfavorable comparisons generate obsession with you allows you to recognize that obsession reflects their recognition of what they lost without reflecting their capacity to deserve what they lost. They see clearly now that you were a superior partner compared to replacement, that you provided what replacement cannot provide, that they downgraded by losing you. Yet this seeing does not translate into being. They see your value without developing capacity to meet that value with adequate reciprocation, recognize you were irreplaceable without doing work that would make them adequate partner for someone of your caliber, obsess over comparison that highlights their loss without addressing patterns that created that loss. The obsession is genuine recognition combined with continued defended stagnation. They know what they lost, they feel the loss acutely through constant comparison, yet they remain exactly the same defended, limited person whose patterns would recreate the same unsustainable dynamic if you were to return to relationship with them. The replacement relationship is failing, but their obsession with you won't make them capable of deserving you back. The avoidance relationship with the replacement is deteriorating, or has already failed, because the replacement's boundaries and standards created friction the avoidant could not tolerate. Because the replacement's refusal to accommodate taught the avoidant that their patterns are costly rather than cost-free. Because the avoidant's constant comparison to you prevented them from genuinely investing in building something new with person who was actually present. The failing replacement relationship generates intensified obsession with you, as the avoidant faces that they cannot easily replicate what they lost. That finding someone willing to tolerate their patterns as you tolerated them is improbable, that they may have lost their best or only chance at sustained relationship by allowing patterns to cost them relationship with you. The intensified obsession manifests through increased attempts to gather information about your life, more frequent checking of your social media, more questions to mutual friends about whether you are seeing anyone new, more monitoring of any indirect information about your happiness or your activities. The avoidant becomes consumed with thoughts about you that intrude during daily life. They wonder what you are doing at random moments. They imagine conversations with you where they explain themselves or express regrets. They replay memories of relationship, focusing on positive moments while minimizing their inadequacy that characterize those moments. They experience their current diminished life quality as directly resulting from your absence. Activities feel less satisfying without sharing them with you. Achievements feel hollow without your recognition. Struggles feel harder without your support that you provided despite receiving inadequate reciprocation. The failing replacement combined with obsession with you creates specific psychological crisis where the avoidant faces that their patterns have real costs, that adequate partners will not tolerate their defended limitations indefinitely, that they lost something valuable through their own inadequacy rather than through circumstances beyond their control. This recognition could theoretically motivate genuine therapeutic work to address defended patterns, could drive them to engage therapy to heal attachment wounds, could inspire examination of how their defenses harm themselves and others, could generate commitment to developing emotional availability and consistency that healthy relationships require. The pain of permanent loss, combined with recognition that their patterns caused that loss, creates optimal conditions for motivation to change. Yet most avoidants do not translate obsession and recognition into genuine therapeutic work despite optimal conditions for change motivation. The obsession remains focused on external loss of you rather than shifting to internal examination of patterns that created loss. They think constantly about missing you without thinking about why their behavior made continuing with them impossible for your well-being. They recognize they lost someone irreplaceable without recognizing they need to become someone capable of sustaining relationship with irreplaceable person. They feel grief and regret without converting those feelings into action toward healing and growth. The obsession is passive suffering rather than active catalyst for transformation. The failure to do genuine work despite obsession and despite failed replacement stems from multiple avoidant psychological dynamics. First, the defended patterns they would need to change are the same defenses that make therapeutic vulnerability feel impossibly threatening. Changing requires examining wounds they have spent lifetime avoiding, requires challenging defenses that feel essential to survival, requires sustained vulnerability that terrifies them more than continued pattern of relationship loss. Second, doing the work requires them to face their responsibility for relationship failures, rather than positioning themselves as victim of circumstances or of your inadequate patience. Accountability threatens their ego and their defended self-concept in ways that passive suffering does not threaten. Third, genuine change requires sustained effort across years, rather than quick fix, requires tolerating discomfort that improvement generates, requires commitment that their defended structure resists making because commitment to anything activates their engulfment fears. The obsession without work also serves defensive function by allowing the avoidant to maintain you as explanation for why they cannot fully invest in new relationships. They cannot move on because you were so special. They cannot commit to anyone else because no one compares to you. They cannot be emotionally available because they are still processing losing you. This narrative protects them from having to face that their patterns rather than their attachment to you prevent healthy relationships, allows them to frame their continued defended limitations as a result of special significance you hold rather than as a result of defensive structure they refuse to address through therapeutic work. The obsession becomes excuse for continued patterns rather than becoming motivation to change patterns. The avoidant may also engage in pseudo work that appears like growth but does not address fundamental defended structure. They may read articles about attachment or listen to podcasts about avoidant patterns, gaining intellectual understanding without doing experiential work of actually practicing vulnerability and examining their wounds. They may tell friends or new partners they are working on themselves, using this claim to buy patience without demonstrating actual behavioral change that genuine work would produce. They may make temporary adjustments motivated by crisis of losing you that evaporate once immediate crisis passes, similar to grand gesture that appears like transformation but cannot be sustained because it lacks foundation in restructured defenses. These pseudo-work efforts allow the avoidant to feel they are addressing their patterns without requiring the genuine, sustained, vulnerable therapeutic process that actual change demands. The obsession also coexists with the avoidant maintaining defended narratives that prevent accountability. Even while obsessing over losing you, they tell themselves and others that you gave up too easily, that you were not patient enough with their struggles, that you should have understood their limitations better, that timing was wrong rather than their patterns being wrong. These defended narratives contradict the obsession. If you gave up too easily, why are they so obsessed with losing you? If you were impatient, why do they recognize you as irreplaceable? Yet the contradictory narratives coexist because the obsession serves different defensive function than the accountability-avoiding narratives serve. The obsession allows them to feel depth of feeling while the narratives protect them from facing their responsibility. Understanding that failing replacement relationship and intensified obsession with you do not translate into capacity to deserve you back allows you to maintain boundaries and forward focus despite any knowledge that they are obsessed with losing you. Their obsession is genuine recognition of what they lost, combined with complete failure to do work that would make them capable of sustaining what they lost if given another chance. They can think about you constantly, can recognize you are irreplaceable, can feel genuine grief about permanent loss while remaining exactly the same defended person whose patterns necessitated your departure.